Hey, how's your week going so far? My name is Alicia.
I'm Nicole.
Why don't we take a little time away from the hustle and bustle of adulting and let's indulge our curiosities just for a bit and talk about killers, psychos, and the unexplained.
Today we are venturing to Delaware to talk about Stephen Brian Pennell and Patty Cannon.
Welcome to Delaware, home of Stephen Brian Pennell, also known as the Route 40 killer, who decided to abduct several women to torture and murder. So I guess Route 40 highway is where Stephen would prowl, and that's where his nickname came from. So Stephen was born November 22nd, 1957 in Glasgow, Delaware. I could go into details, however, there's a lot to talk about, so I'm just going to get right into it. On November 29th, 1987, Shirley Anna Ellis, a 23-year-old nurse, left work around 6 p.m. I guess that Route 40 was her way home, and apparently she would either walk down the route to get home or she would catch a ride to and from work. However, later that evening, her body was found on the side of the road, was partially nude, and her legs were spread out and her feet were tied with adhesive tape. There wasn't exactly signs of sexual assault. However, there was a string tied around her neck and she appeared to be hit in the head with a hammer.
Oh,
Yeah, just trying to get home from work.
right.
So then on June 28th, 1988, which was about 7 months later, Catherine DeMauro, 31, was seen walking down Route 40 around 11:30 p.m. Unfortunately, this will be the last time that she was seen alive. So the next morning around 6:25 a.m., construction workers found her naked body. Again, supposedly no signs of sexual assault, but she was murdered by strangulation and hammer blows to the head. Her body was covered in these random blue fibers. The blue fibers are important.
Okay.
So after the second victim was found, police started to figure out that these women were being abducted from the Route 40 area and decided to start taking some action. Like, oh, I guess we should probably set up some stings or, set up some people to try to see what's happening here. So they would have federal agents that would be disguised as sexual workers and try to gain information, word on the street type info. They would peer into vehicles of people that were trying to come and pick them up, because what they're looking for is they're looking at their flooring, they're looking at the carpets in their vehicles, seeing do they have these blue fibers?
Okay.
So the same ones that were on Catherine's body. So now they're starting to look into, peering into all the vehicles, what color's your flooring in there? Um, yeah. So it seems like in the 80s, the US Route 40 highway was a hot spot. It was where you want to pick up prostitutes. They would walk up and down the highway waiting for their next customers to pull up. So Stephen must have thought this would be the easiest place to pick up vulnerable women. Okay, so it's in the 80s. It's this Route 40. I guess there's just prostitutes walking up and down the roads. This is where he's all right, I can pick up some easy victims this way.
Yeah.
Then on August 22nd, 1988, 27-year-old Margaret Lynn Finner disappeared. Witnesses claimed she had gotten to a blue Ford that was driven by a white male. Well, about 3 months later, her body was actually found by a hunter near a canal, but her body was so badly decomposed, it was difficult to even obtain an exact cause of death.
Oh,
It was noted that there were visible signs of torture on what had remained. She actually had to be identified by her dental records.
oof.
Yeah. Then on September 18th, 1988, Michelle Gordon, another local sex worker, was seen entering a blue Ford. 2 days later, September 20th, her body was found on the rocks by this canal. The autopsy concluded that cocaine was in her system, but it was such an amount that it actually had caused her heart to stop beating while she was being tortured.
Holy crap.
Yes. And you have to imagine, if that's a normalcy for, if you're doing cocaine all the time, I'm sure it'd probably take an obscene amount for that to actually have that kind of effect on you. Police and federal agents are still prowling Route 40, trying to peer into vehicles, trying to watch for this blue Ford, just trying to gain any type of information on who's abducting and murdering these women. Then on September 14th, Renee Toshner was an undercover police officer that was posing as a sex worker. Well, she spotted this blue Ford. It was 7 times in 20 minutes that he had driven up and down the road, creeping, looking, circling, trying to decide, who he wanted to pick up. So when he finally did decide to creep up next to her and he stopped, but when she peered inside the vehicle, she noticed the floor had blue carpet. The man was nervous appearing. He was a white male, but he was trying to convince her pretty hard, to get in the vehicle. Obviously, Renee refused. She was like, oh, never mind. I'm just tired. But somehow during this encounter, I'm not quite sure how, but she was able to like reach her hand in and like snag some of these blue carpet fibers. And she was also able to get his license plate number, which they ran. And it turned out to be Stephen Pennell, who was a 31-year-old electrician, married, father of two, no criminal record. So, wow, right?
Yeah, that's why they're not finding him because he's holding a job and has a family and
Living the American dream, right? During the day, like got your woman, got your children, like looking like just a normal human, just out in society. But people surely are not what they seem.
no.
Then on September 23rd, 26-year-old Catherine Ann Mayer disappeared. This time, a police officer had actually seen her physically get into that blue Ford on Route 40 at 9:30 p.m., it was noted. And he was able to write down this license plate number, which once again was ran and turned out that it belonged to, guess who? Stephen Pennell. Who knew, right? So with this evidence, Delaware police prosecutor approved like a police search warrant for Stephen's blue truck. No boy, did they find what they were looking for.
Oh.
There was several prints, there was blood, there was hair strands, and some of them actually matched the victims. There was also like adhesive tape and a quote unquote torture kit, which contained pliers, whips, handcuffs, needles, knives, and just other types of restraints. Stephen was arrested on November 29th, 1988, a year after he took his first victim, and was charged with 3 murders: Shirley Anna Ellis, Catherine DeMauro, and Michelle Gordon. So during the trial, the defense attorneys claimed the blue fibers that the officer had taken from his vehicle, they weren't obtained legally. But luckily the judge was like, nah, bro, it was visible. So it was visible to the officer's eye, so free game. So they let it stay.
Okay.
This was actually the first trial in the United States that actually allowed DNA evidence to be obsolete evidence, which I found interesting. On November 23rd, 1989, Stephen was convicted of murdering Shirley Ellis and Catherine DeMauro. However, due to lack of evidence, they acquitted him on Michelle Gordon, but he still was sentenced to 2 life sentences. So, side note, after Stephen was convicted, a bouquet of flowers was actually sent to the prosecutor's office with a note reading, "You made us feel human again," from the women of Route 40. That's pretty powerful. So, like, I know we go through the stories pretty quickly, but I mean, these workers, I mean, they're just trying to make a living. That's what they do. But they were, they're terrified. Like every time that they go to work, they don't know if they're going to go home. I mean, they have children, they have, they have families.
Yeah.
They were terrified. I mean, this was a big deal. So for them to actually like send flowers and send a note like, thank you for making us feel like we actually matter, pretty big deal, I think.
I think that's a huge deal.
Yeah. So Stephen's lawyer decided to try and appeal the court cases, of course. So again, on the grounds that the blue fibers were obtained from the vehicle illegally. Well, guess what? The court actually dismissed that, and it was based on new evidence. So since his lawyers are like reopening the case over and over again, like they're still obtaining like all these new evidences, all these new things. And so now they had enough evidence to actually convict him on Michelle's murder.
Oh.
Yes. So not only did the other sentences stand, but now they had enough evidence to actually say, hey, you know what? Now we got 3 out of 3. So that was good. So yeah, great job. Try to go for something less and you're getting a little more, honey.
Right? That backfired.
Yeah. So obviously, Stephen, who's now upset with his lawyer, he decides, I'm going to represent myself.
Oh, God.
Yeah, so basically all he did was cite different passages from the Hebrew Bible as his argument. So 2 witnesses came forward to testify his guilt during this time. So they're still getting, they're getting more and more witnesses. So what he's doing right now is he's trying to look crazy.
Yeah.
Representing himself. He's like stating all these passages from the Hebrew Bible, trying to plead for the death sentence now. Saying like, I deserve the death sentence. So the court did end up just saying, oh, bro, you want the death sentence? All right, then. Gave it to him. So now he has the death sentence. And it's funny because like he was the only defendant in Delaware history to actually plead and willingly seek the death sentence.
That's crazy.
Yes. So then on March 14th, 1992 at 9:49 a.m., Stephen was injected via lethal injection, becoming the first person executed in Delaware in 46 years. Yeah, I guess he had some crab cake, steak, corn on the cob, french fries, bread and butter, and a cola for his last meal. But yeah, bringing this awful case to an end.
Why would you even, I guess, but why would you even need a last meal?
No, I just like to throw that in there.
Uh, Today we talk about the notorious Patty Cannon, born Lucretia Patricia Hanley, born sometime around 1760, give or take 10 years. There's no birth records that could ever be found on her, so they're not exactly sure what year she was born. She was born into a family who owned property in a house on the Delaware-Maryland border. Patty was the leader and mastermind of a gang in the early 19th century, later known as the Reverse Underground Railroad. You heard me correctly. The Reverse Underground Railroad. This was a family affair, and her gang would kidnap slaves and freed blacks from Delmarva, later known as Delaware, and they would move them further south to sell to plantation owners.
Oh, gross.
So they've been freed or made it to freedom, and they would kidnap these people, or they were born free because they were born in the North, right? And they would just kidnap them. Patty marries Jesse Cannon, a local farmer, in 1787. He died around 1826. They had two children in that time. Jesse Cannon Jr. was born 1788, and Mary Cannon was born 1789. Mary, the daughter, was in the business and married to two of the notorious members before the gang dispersed. So Mary's first husband was Henry Brereton. They married in 1811. He was a blacksmith who kidnapped people to sew. He went to prison in 1811 for kidnapping, but escaped, then was captured, convicted of murder, and hung with his criminal associate Joseph Griffith. Then Mary went on to marry Joe Johnson in 1813. Joe became Patty's number one, right-hand man. So this is her mom's, right-hand man now. One of the reasons that they got away with it for so long was because their gang consisted of white criminals and black men used as decoys. And Patty's husband and a man named Robert Brenerton, Mary's first husband, were cousins, and they stayed until 1826. So they stayed in the gang until then. The reason these kidnappers were so well popular and paid so well is because in 1808, the U.S. Congress banned the importation of slaves. So if you were here and you were already a slave or born into slavery, it was fine. But they couldn't import any more slaves from other countries.
So they're just making bank selling people.
Yes.
Just
So they had to already be in the U.S., smuggled in, or born into slavery. Because of the restriction of the supply of cash value of slaves shot up to over $1,000 a slave.
in 18 what?
In 1808.
That's a lot.
Yeah, creating the strong incentive for kidnappers.
Obviously.
In today's dollars, that's $42,298 a person. Maryland and Delaware were slave states, but also had free blacks as well. Many mixed race families were formed during the Revolutionary War around Virginia. Pennsylvania had the largest population of free blacks in the North and no professional police force. So the state of Pennsylvania did not have its own police force. Many free people lived in Patty's neighborhood, making it easier for them to kidnap children. So she's kidnapping her neighbor's kids.
Awful.
They had to be more careful when stealing slaves since killing white slave traders was a serious offense. But kidnapping free people wasn't really looked into for many reasons. The police were afraid of Patty's gang. Proof was needed. The authorities had little to no concern for African Americans. Black people were not considered great witnesses, and every time they got close, Patty fled across the state line. Victim accounts were being printed in the abolitionist Journal of the African Observer, stating captives were chained and hidden in the basement, attic, and secret rooms in the Cannon house. Then they took the captured to the Cannon ferry and traveled down the Natoke River to the Chesapeake Bay and on to the southern slave markets. Everyone who did make it back across to the north would give depositions against the gang. They usually had tales about Joe Johnson keeping them in leg irons, and he would severely whip anyone who insisted they were free. Mary was said to have told people, "Did good to see him beat the boys." So she was like encouraging her husband to beat people. Once, a 25-year-old black woman named Lydia Smith testified that she was kept in Cannon's house before being moved to Johnson's Tavern, where she was held for 5 months before being shipped south and sold into slavery. The gang was initially indicted in May 1822. Joe Johnson was sentenced to the pillory. It's a wooden frame used to hold their head and hands. I'm sure you've seen them.
Yeah, like one of the old
Yeah.
like
Your
this.
head and hands are hanging out and it's got holes. Yeah.
If you go to like the western towns, they have them in the front where you put your head in, you put your hands in, take your picture.
Correct. Okay. So they stuck him in that and they gave him 39 lashes. Everyone else never went on trial. Mayor Joseph Watson of Philadelphia and Governor John Andrew Schultz of Pennsylvania worked together to recover young free blacks kidnapped by the gang in the summer of 1825 and prosecute the members. So they were like trying to figure out like who's free, get the paperwork in order, so then they would go down to the south and like get these people back and bring them back home.
Well, it should have been whoever was purchasing these children too. I mean, I understand going after the gang because they're so notorious and they're afraid of them, but they should be going after these plantation owners or whomever is purchasing these kids.
Man, they were just selling slaves. I didn't know that they were free blacks.
Yeah, they did.
I'm not denying what you're saying. I'm just saying.
I know.
However, they did not succeed in any convictions of white gang members. Biracial member John Purnell, aka John Smith, was convicted on 2 counts of kidnapping in Pennsylvania in 1827. He was sentenced to a fine and 42 years in jail and died in jail 5 years later. I mean, jail back then was not
No.
what it is now. 42 years? I'm not surprised he died after 5. In 1829, however, bodies were discovered on the farm. So in April of 1829, Patty was now indicted on 4 counts of murder by a grand jury of 28 males. An infant female on April 26, 1822. These are the bodies that were found on the farm. A male child on April 26, 1822. Adult male on October 1st, 1820, and an African male on June 1st, 1824. This is about when they had passed. Indictments were signed by the Attorney General of Delaware, James Rogers. A witness, Cyrus James, stated he saw Patty take an injured African child, not yet dead, in her apron, but she returned alone. Cyrus James had been purchased by Patty when he was only 7 years old. He grew up in her household and participated in her crimes. Patty confessed to 24 murders, so they only found 4 bodies, but supposedly she killed 24 people. Patty died in her cell on May 11th, 1829, somewhere between the age of 60 and 70. Sources differ on whether she ever was convicted and sentenced before her death and whether Patty died by suicide or natural causes. Patty's body was originally buried in the jail's graveyard. When they turned the land into a parking lot, 3 women were moved to Potter's Field. Patty's skull was removed from the other remains and displayed all over. Like they were lending her skull out to everybody. And then it was loaned to Dover Public Library in 1961, and it's now on loan to the Smithsonian. According to folklore, Cannon was a large, unruly woman with enormous and ruthless strength.
What a reason to be famous, though, for being such an awful human.
Yeah, why would you want that to be your legacy?
Exactly. Well, I mean, I'm sure she wanted to be her legacy, but still, all the museums that are, displaying,
Showcasing her? Yeah.
hey, look, she's famous because she decided to be an awful human.
I
I know. Gross.
flabbergasted. I don't know why they took her skull away from her. Just rebury her and be done with it.
Leave her there. for fucking concrete on the bitch. Like, goodbye.
Well, they can't legally. If you're gonna disturb a graveyard, you have to dig them all up and rebury them somewhere.
Well, it seems like a lot of legalities were just swept under anyway.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
Let us finish this off, the little of the unexplained. So, Delaware's cryptic creature is the Pukwudgies. So, Pukwudgies are said to be like 2 to 3 foot tall gray creatures with bulbous heads, large ears, and glowing eyes. They reside in the forests and the swamps of Delaware. So, legend says they were once friendly and helpful until humanity betrayed them. Pukwudgies are shape-shifting creatures with a lust for chaos. They can present as different animals, like they're shapeshifters. But porcupines are the ones that's most often proclaimed. So they trick humans and lure them, like either deeper into the forest to be lost, or to their death, or just to be hurt. Have you ever heard of the Pukwudgies? Let us know. We're interested.
Yeah, I'm interested because I have not. Well, we would like to thank you for joining us in our discoveries of Delaware this week. Please join us next week while we travel to Florida. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss our adventures next week into killers, psychos, and the unexplained.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.